All right. The curses of Deuteronomy, examining Deuteronomy 28:68. This is going to be a pure myth special edition part one. Part one, I'm basically going to be focusing on just the verse 68 and maybe some surrounding verses, maybe, but my main focus will be Deuteronomy 28:68. Part two, I'm going to simply walk through every single verse and I'm going to show that these things actually have come to pass. Um, and also it pulled some pictures from Alexandria, Egypt. Basically people who have been mummified. These are individuals who perhaps themselves were Jews, and this is what they, you know, most likely would have looked like.
So real off because he want to say he wants to bring up mummy portraits and say that's how the Jews perhaps looked, and I actually got cousins that look sort of like those Fayum portraits. But anyways, here's a quick Google search, and black people, we come in different shades and different colors, and if you look at some of these guys here and women, they look like they could be some kin to those Fayum portraits. They really do. So just for him to try to bring up these portraits as a debunking mechanism just shows you how corrupt this guy's doctrine is. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on his 5-hour video because in order to deal with his 5-hour video, I would probably have to make a 200-hour response to it. And I mean, that just wouldn't be edifying. So, we'll go in to basically prove that he doesn't know what he's talking about. And he's taking on a doctrine that he doesn't even know is the other Jesus. But we're going to get into that. But so real, your Fayum portraits, you got it from your brother who is in S.O.G. and both of you in error, both of you are in error, and just to put up a visual like that just shows that you don't have any understanding whatsoever. And I don't even know what kind of black people you hang around if you don't have people to remind you of those Fayum portraits. But anyway.
So this is my proof outline for tonight. You guys are going to learn a few things, okay? You're going to learn 5 things. 1A, many curses to take place in the land, right? That's what you're going to learn. Many curses to take place in the land, especially Deuteronomy 28:68. That is key. Deuteronomy 28:68.
Now, when Ssoreal, when he talks about things, Jerusalem being conquered in 70 AD, pretty much he doesn't know that he's holding a preterist doctrine. And when you get into 70 AD and that's an end time prophecy fulfilled, then you got to pretty much say that there's a lot of other things that were fulfilled too, if you're going to subscribe to the 70 AD doctrine. Okay? And the 70 AD doctrine pretty much hinges on Luke 21 and 22. So we'll get into that, but let's just find out first what a preterist doctrine is, or preterism. And Wikipedia pretty much sums it up, and here's a little snippet of it. Preterism holds that ancient Israel finds its continuation or fulfillment in the Christian church at the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The term preterism comes from the Latin praetor, which Webster's 1913 dictionary lists as a prefix denoting that something is past or beyond. So, if you're saying that the destruction of the temple in 70 AD is a prophecy that passed, then you are, in a sense, a preterist. You might not be a full preterist, but nonetheless, you are a preterist. Let's go to Luke 21 and 22 to find out, you know, why preterism is pretty much a failed doctrine that's easy to unravel. So, since he wants to say that the prophecy of 70 AD, the Jerusalem being destroyed or besieged, is in a sense taking place in if 70 AD is a prophecy of Christ fulfilling all things, then you pretty much hold the preterist doctrine. So when that temple fell and you say that, that was a part of the prophecy, then you got to go to Luke 21 and find out, you know what I mean? And just see, because let's start at verse 20, Luke 21 and 20. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is near. Okay, they said armies. Well, last I checked, armies means more than one army. Okay, right now we're talking about the Roman army, and even if Roman had different territories, like the U.S. has different territories, like Guam, Puerto Rico. Those are different territories, but they are a part of the United States. So if they suit up and go to war, they are under the banner of the United States. So that's not really considered armies. Now, if you bring in the Royal British military, then you would have armies, which means more than one. Okay, you would have more than one. So you can't try to line up Deuteronomy 28 where it says he shall conquer Jerusalem, or or what Ssoreal is trying to portray in Deuteronomy 28 is in the singular. Okay, but when Christ made his prophecy, it was armies in the plural. So as you see, Ssoreal, you don't understand how to separate the two. You don't understand how to separate the two. Because when you look at Luke 21 and 20, there's armies, meaning more than one. And then when you look at another scripture where it says all armies will surround Jerusalem, that's still more than one. But in Deuteronomy 28, you see one. And it's talking about he. So, Ssoreal, so you can say that Deuteronomy is what basically Christ was talking about, because Christ is talking about plural armies, and in Deuteronomy 28 it's talking about the singular. So if it's the singular that took place in Deuteronomy 28:68, which you're saying was fulfilled in 70 AD, then the plural armies which Christ is talking about has yet to come. So that means the 70 AD prophecy is Deuteronomy 28 and not that of Christ. So, brother, and I know that your little mind is gonna be like, hold on, what is he talking about? Yeah, I know you're gonna say that, and your S.O.G and Shield Squad are gonna say the same thing, because they can't wrap their mind around the preterist doctrine that you guys are dabbling in that you don't even know about. You opening up a new book, a new worm hole that you don't even consider orca even conceive. Your perception there is just terrible. So you're dealing with preterism, brother. So if you're saying 70 AD is what Christ was talking about and Deuteronomy 28, you are proven to be a heresy, because you're trying to make apples out of oranges, and you can't do it. You gotta pick a stance and go with it. You can't merge it all into one as an iniquity, because that right there, brother, is shoddy scholarship. And that's what you guys go around doing, coming with shoddy scholarship that you think is scholarship, and it ain't really scholarship. You're doing little pre-K studying, trying to learn your letters and your ABCs. That's what you're doing, and you're opening up something you're not ready for. But let's read on. And then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. So if you're saying that in 70 AD that was a Christ prophecy, then you're saying that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But hold on, let's go down now. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there will be a great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. They shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Now, in order to understand 24 of Luke 21, then you have to go to Romans 11 to find out about the Gentiles being fulfilled. And I did a nice video pretty much explaining Romans 11 and who the Gentiles are and how the Gentiles shall be fulfilled. So you're mixing two doctrines up that you know not. And you got to cut it out, brother, because army and armies are two totally different things. Okay? So let's just cut that out, brother. You know, let's stop the math. Let's even go to Deuteronomy 28. We're gonna start at verse 50 to show you that when Christ referred to armies, meaning more than one, and Deuteronomy 28 and 50 is talking about a nation of fierce continents. Obviously, there's two different descriptions right here, because you see right here, a nation of fierce continents which shall not regard the person of old, nor show favor to the young. And he, which is singular, which is this nation, shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land until thou be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kind, or flocks of thy sheep, until he have destroyed thee. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest, throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. Okay, so basically, he's gonna come. This nation is gonna come through and tear down a city. Okay. All right. So, you know, Jerusalem was torn down a couple times. I haven't really looked into it, but I need to. So when I come with stuff like this, I can pretty much just debunk you with ease. But yeah, it's saying that the Lord shall bring, and when you go to verse 49, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from the far end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Okay, so this is crazy because I'm thinking the Romans, the Israel, they understood Romans because they had dwellings. Basically, when you look at Tacitus talks about it. He talks about the Romans not liking the people of Israel because everything they felt was sacred was an abomination to Israel. So they had understanding of each other's languages and each other's perception of religious ideologies. So to tie Deuteronomy 28 up with 70 AD is just a bad argument. I mean, it's so bad and terrible. You guys don't even know it, because then in order to use Deuteronomy 28 as being, or 68 as being fulfilled in 70 AD, and then use that with the temple, you're all over the place. You're all over the place, brother Ssoreal, and you know we need some answers. I'm waiting for you to answer this, brother, because I can't even call that scholarship what you're doing. All you're doing is quoting stuff from other people that you hear, and y'all have, like, you and your group have like a little think tank, and nobody's thinking. It's just a tank, brother. A tank with no thinking. You're thinking that you're thinking, but you're not thinking. Smite with madness and blindness. And man, as I go through these verses, it's just sad to me that you guys think that you know what you're talking about and you're so far off. That's disturbing. And it's scary because you got people actually listening to you and think that you know that you have a clue in what you're saying. And you don't, brother. You don't have a clue.
Happened from the land of Israel. If it did not happen from the land of Israel, then you have to ask yourself, is it a prophecy? So there were people that were able to, and there were people that were not able to show the genealogy. If that is the case, how is it that you're able to trace yourself back to Israelites if you also have no written record?
Ssoreal, you just came and said that some of the Israelites in 70 AD knew who they were and some of them didn't. And that was kind of odd because you said some of them didn't in 70 AD. If they didn't in 70 AD, as you said, didn't know who they were in 70 AD, then 2,000 years later, those same ones that didn't know who they are mysteriously got records of who they are. That's just absurd and stupid. I mean, but anyways, that's that doctrine that they want to be partial preterists and Christians, but you can't mix the two. When you say that you're a preterist and saying that Christ's prophecies were fulfilled in 70 AD, then you guys basically got to say all of it was fulfilled in 70 AD. Okay, okay. So, anyways, let's go back to Deuteronomy 28 and 51, and let's just go through that for a second and see, why the Israelites would not know who they are according to 70 AD, because all of this happened in 70 AD. So that means this is a condition that would have went on, and now 2,000 years later, they should just supposed to be just destroyed. All right. So, anyways, let's see. And he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle, and the fruit of thy land, until thy be destroyed. All right. How are they going to be destroyed? Which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kind, or flocks of thy sheep, until thy have been destroyed, until he have destroyed thee. Okay, so basically, when it's saying destroyed, this is basically saying that he's going to do it. Is he going to just, destroy you and just wipe you off the face of the earth? No. That means he's going to basically just take everything you got, and you're destroyed because you have nothing. Okay, but if you want to say that these people are going to be destroyed, like just because you say in 70 AD, Josephus said that thousands were sold and thousands of them were not sold. It was just so many of them to where they went on ships and the ships crashed, like just thousands of ships just crashed and just killing millions of people. That's absurd and it sounds stupid. Okay, but anyways, you want to make it seem like the people of God have been destroyed, like just done away with. Okay, so, and if you're not saying that, then you basically got to say that they were destroyed as far as their identity goes. Because there's only two ways, or you come with another idea of what destroyed means. If they didn't destroy their identity and their belief system, then destroyed means they wiped them out. And that's hard to do when Paul said it before 70 AD, because Paul was talking before 70 AD, and then if Deuteronomy 28 happened in 70 AD after Paul, which is kind of weird if Christ came before 70 AD and Deuteronomy 28 happened after Christ, but Christ was fulfilled in 70 AD. Now we're in a new covenant. Then you got a lot of explaining to do, brother, because that means right now Paul, he would be destroyed. His doctrine would be destroyed. Well, I can't say that. And see, it's confusing me even trying to understand where they're coming from. But anyways, did God destroy his people? Let's see what Paul had to say. Romans 11, 1 through 3. I say then, hath God cast away his people? God forbid, for I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God hath not cast away his people which he foreknew. What ye not what the scripture saith of Elias, how he maketh intercessions against, how he make intercession to God against Israel, saying, Lord, they have killed thy prophets and digged down thy altars. I am left alone, and thy seek my life. And I believe that's talking about Genesis 34 and 30, when Judah was saying, y'all left me alone, Simeon and Levi. Now I may be destroyed, me and my house, or me and my family. So he didn't really mean that they were going to be destroyed. He just meant that they were going to be coming after him. But you guys want to make it seem like, destroyed means something different. And let's go to Deuteronomy 28 and 64 and see how the destroying is really meant. Okay? And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth unto the other. And then see, now this is the crazy part, because you're saying in 70 AD Jerusalem was sacked, and that's part of 28, Deuteronomy 28. So now the burden of proof is on you to show that the Israelites were spread it, to the Arctics, north and south, to Antarctica. You got to show that they were in the habitable parts, of course. You got to show that they were up there with the Eskimos. They were enslaved by the Eskimos. You got to show that they were taken down to Australia, Iceland, Greenland, the Netherlands. You got to show, and I mean, this is real huge right here, since, all these records are supposed to be just readily accessible. So real, you saying that some of these people didn't know, but the other ones did, but mysteriously, we're supposed to have records now of the ones that didn't know. So you got to have records showing these manifests that Israel was brought over here to the Americas, brother, north, south, and central. Because it's saying right here in Deuteronomy 28:64, and the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the earth unto the other. So the burden of proof is on you, and if you're able to prove that, brother, I like to have a dialogue with you about the Israelites being brought over to the Americas, and I want to see some writing on some of those igloos or drawings on the igloos to show that the Israelites were enslaved to the Eskimos. This is the kind of stuff that's about to be very revealing, and if you could pull this out, brother, you're gonna change the whole you're gonna open a lot of eyes. So and there they shall serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. So according to Tacitus, we knew about the Roman gods. We even know who the Romans were. We understood that. We understood their language. They understood ours, and one thing Tacitus said: everything that they considered sacred was an abomination to us. So when these people came from far off, what you're saying is Romans in 70 AD to sack Israel in 70 AD, then we would already know who they were, because in 70 AD already Egypt was a Roman province, and we had dwellings in Egypt. We had dwellings in all parts of that tectonic plate right there. Okay, so we were very familiar with the Romans because the Romans had already conquered several territories. That's why the Egyptians try to help the Israelites fight, according to historians. So, Ssoreal, you got a lot of explaining to do, brother. If 70 AD did occur, you got to explain how it happened with Deuteronomy 28 and Christ's prophecies at the same time. Because when you say Christ's prophecy was fulfilled, then you say all things are fulfilled. And when you say all things are fulfilled, that means everything that was written. And everything that is written means everything in Deuteronomy. You can't say, oh, well, that's everything about Christ. Yeah, it's everything about Christ, but pretty much it says all things written, okay? All things. So that means in 70 AD, we shouldn't even be talking about, oh, yeah, well, some of the things in Deuteronomy 28, it did happen, but some of it's still outstanding, and we're still waiting for it to happen. Nah, brother, that ain't how that works. Luke 21 and 20 says, or 22 says, all things written may be fulfilled. Okay, so let's not do that. Or if you do that, then make a response video and help us understand, brother. Because right now you're putting a burden on people that you already admitted didn't know who they were, or at least a portion of these people didn't know who they were. But now you're saying these people today don't know who they are, so how can they prove it? Well, I mean, you just took up for the ones back in the day and said they didn't know. So how can you expect the ones today to know? Because the ones back in the day were much closer to that time and they didn't know. So it's absurd to say today, oh, so now what is your proof? And then when you go with DNA, I say this all the time. If you go with DNA, then you're going against the flood story. You're even going against Adam and Eve because DNA has all these different strands that say, okay, you got B1, A1, and all of that stuff. But when the reset button was hit, there should be one DNA patriarchal strand, and that should be from Noah. The three sons should have the identical marker as Noah, and their offsprings through this patriarchal lineage should all link back to Noah. So when you say you got all these different strands and you couldn't come from this and you couldn't come from that, then you're basically trying to debunk the Bible with science. So now you're not even a preterist. Now you believe in the science when you believe in DNA, because you don't believe in because now you're coming up with a genealogy, and you're trying to use science to prove who people are, when it's very simple. That one strand should go back to Noah. So that would make DNA just a fallacy. But you guys don't see that. Okay. And when I say a fallacy, I mean the haplogroups, because that should only be one haplogroup, and that's the haplogroup that comes from Noah. But anyways, let's let Ssoreal.
And once again, since genetics was not a way that God or the Israelites had ever traced themselves and was a qualifier, then you can't use that either. And this is just for the Levites, right? So, how is it that you had ancient Israelites who couldn't prove their identity almost 3,000 years ago, but you today, so, in so many millenniums somehow removed, can do that? It doesn't make sense. So, where's your paper trail proof? Do you even know who your grandparents are? Your great grandparents. Do you even know those answers? But I mean, you don't even know those answers, but for sure you're of ancient grandparents or ancient Israelite origins. It doesn't make sense. So to run around and make claims that you're an Israelite and that all that African Americans are Israelites is misleading. And if you know these facts, it's becoming deceptive at this point. Now, another thing is you have to remember that these curses and also these blessings, they happen from the land of Judea. Anytime you read Deuteronomy 28, and you read all throughout the chapter, you keep on finding this common theme that they're talking about these curses and blessings mainly happening in the land. So I'm going to go ahead and show that. If you read verse 8, it says, look, in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Now also, this is Deuteronomy. This is not the time where they're actually in the promised land yet. So this is the reason why that they kind of talk the way that they're talking, because they're about to possess the promised land, right? Look at verse 11. In the land which the Lord sware unto thy fathers to give thee. That land was not Africa. Here's verse 12. The heaven to give the rain and unto thy land, right? Your land, right? Your land is not America. Your land is not Africa. Well, I mean, technically it is because you're not an Israelite, but you get what I'm saying. And the fruit of thy land, right? That is verse 28, the fruit of thy land. What land? The land which the Lord God hath giveth thee, according to verse 8. He's being very specific. Look at verse 21. From off the land, whither thou goest to possess it, right? That's talking about the land of Israel, right? You're going to possess the land of Israel no matter what direction that you take to possess it. That is where the blessings and cursings are going to happen. You have, quote, the rain of thy land, powder and dust. The rain of thy land, right? Also, verse 33, the fruit of thy land, right? What is your land? The land of Israel. That is your land. That is the land that God gave the Israelites, right? That's what it's supposed to be, right? Look at verse 42. All thy trees and fruit of thy land shall the locust consume. Verse 51, and they shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land. There's no getting around this. Look at verse 52. Wherein thou trusteth throughout all thy land, right? In all thy gates throughout all thy land, which the Lord God, thy God, hath given thee, right? He's given them, he's basically giving them the promised land, right? This is the big deal that they're making. So you can already see that a lot of these curses and blessings are surrounding the land of Israel. It said, listen, I'm about to give you all this land, okay? If y'all do good there, it's going to be great there. If y'all act up there, it's going to be crazy there. And also wherever you go from that starting point of that land. Now here's a case in point. Now, even though we went through all of that, we got to separate that from verse 63 and verse 68, right? Or not separate, but we have to compound that. So verse 63 helps us to better understand verse 68. Let me go ahead and read it and explain it to you. This is verse 63. It says, and it shall come to pass as the Lord rejoice over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you into naught, and ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. Now, how does that read in other translations, right? You got the modern literal version, you have the ESV, you have the Exegesis Companion Bible, easy to read version. You have the original Aramaic New Testament script. You have the Lamsa, ancient Near Eastern script, right? And it's very apparent that it's talking about the land of Israel, whether you're going to possess it or not. Look what it says. And you will be plucked from the land where you go in to possess it. And you should be plucked off the land that you are entering to take possession of it. Or, and uproot from the soil you go to possess. Or, but the people will take you out of that land. What is that land? That specific land of Israel, right? And also you have, and to lift you away from the land into which you enter there to inherit it. Now, this is Deuteronomy 28. It's specifically talking about the blessings and the cursings within the land that you are about to possess, right? The land of Israel. So that is what it's talking about.
I don't know what Ssoreal is reading, but when you read Deuteronomy 28 and 63, it said, it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, then that's saying what the Lord is going to do and has done. Okay, so it's not talking about you're about to possess a land. It's saying that the land is already possessed, and because these are the curses, Ssoreal. Okay, if 70 AD you are in Jerusalem, you're possessing the land that you took away from the Hittites and all of those guys and the Canaanites. So it's already done in 70 AD. Going from your premise. So if 70 AD is about the curses, how are you lining up 63 with the blessings that are about to happen when it's basically saying I have done good to you and now I'm about to do this to destroy you, and I will do good for you again because he's not going to cast away his people. So I mean, it's surreal. And so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you. That sounds like a curse to me, brother, and bring you to nothing. and ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. So, whether thou goest to possess it, I guess that's what you're saying. You're saying you're going to possess it. But in 70 AD, we already possessed it. So right now, you're just showing that your understanding of preterism in 70 AD is just all off. It's all out of whack, brother. You know, I don't know how you guys do it, and it just baffles me every time I do a video on you guys, and it just shows how silly and idiotic you guys are.
With that in mind, we could look at verse 68. We all know what it says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold into your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Now, once again, when you look at this, it makes it very clear that, look, it says, and Jehovah will bring you into Egypt again with ships, right? By way of which I said to you, you shall see it no more. It says again in ships, Mizraim when in ships, returns to Mizraim with ships. The Lord will send you back to Egypt in ships. So it's very clear that this whole thing will play out again if the Israelites don't obey the Lord. Now there was one who texted me. Shoot, I'm sorry, y'all. Oh man. Give me just a quick second here. I really apologize. But I hope this is helping. Just give me one more second. Okay. Just give me one more second here. All right, I'm back. So now let's go and visit 2nd and 3rd Maccabees. You know, this is the first wave. 2nd and 3rd Maccabees basically shows the Greek captivity matches the following from Deuteronomy 28, right? Now, we can look at this in verse 26 of 2nd Maccabees. It says this: accept this sacrifice on behalf of all your people, Israel, and preserve your portion and to make it holy. Gather together our scattered people. Set free those who are slaves among the Gentiles. Look on those who are rejected and despised, and let the Gentiles know that you are our God. Punish those who oppress and are insolent with pride. Plant your people in your holy place as Moses promised. Then the priests sang hymns, right? After that, the materials of the sacrifice had been consumed. Nehemiah ordered that the liquid was left should be poured on large stones. When this was done, a flame blazed up. When the light from the altar shone back, it went out. So this is a prayer that a priest is giving, and I believe it's Nehemiah. And you know, basically, it was accepted. So this prayer was basically accepted. But notice what he says. He says, gather together our scattered people, set free those who are slaves among the Gentiles. Where is he talking about? What is going on here? Let's continue to read. If you go to chapter 5, right, verses 2 all the way through 24, which I'm not going to read the whole thing because I'm not trying to keep y'all here all night, but I will read what I have in colors. It says, quote, he sought the whole country, and by the way, this is talking about Antiochus. Okay, he was really angry with Jerusalem. He sought the whole country of Judea. He thought the whole country of Judea was in revolt, and he became as furious as a wild animal. So he left Egypt and took Jerusalem by storm. 3 days after Jerusalem had lost 80,000 people, 40,000 killed in the attack, and at least that many taken away to be sold as slaves. Let's see what it says at the bottom. Antiochus hated the Jews so much that he sent an army of 22,000 mercenary troops from Mysia to Jerusalem under the command of a man named Apollonius, with orders to kill every man in the city and to sell the women and boys as slaves. So now all of a sudden this picture is getting a little bit more clear, right? Now they're being sold as slaves. So now I want to go to third Maccabees and I want to show you how much more prevalent this was. Check this out. But from among the Jews, by the way, I'm only going to be reading in the colors because, like I said, I'm not trying to keep you guys here all night. You know, you can pause it and read this at any time you like. But among the Jews, there were constant grief, lament, and crying. Everywhere their hearts were on fire as they groaned and bewailed the unexpected destruction that the king had suddenly inflicted upon them. What district or city or what inhabited place of any kind, of what streets weren't filled with the grieving and weeping for them? They were being sent off together by the generals in every city in a merciless and cruel manner. At the sight of these unusual punishments, even some of the Jews' enemies wept over their most desirable or most miserable expulsion, right? To expel, to take away, to carry away captive, right? Now listen up to this next part because this next part is going to match exactly a part of Deuteronomy 28. I want you to remember it. Elderly men were being led away, bent over with age, their feet prodding along under the distress of a forced, swift march with no consideration given to their age, right? Also, you have, about the young bride women. It says they were led away with their heads bare and began to sing a funeral song together in place of a wedding song as they were roughly handled by the cruel treatment of a foreign nation. These captives were violently dragged away in public to be put aboard on a ship, right? Their husbands, in the prime of their youth, had ropes tied around their necks and also constrained by the power of iron chains. Some were fastened by the necks to the ship's benches. Some were secured by their feet with unbreakable shackles. The treatment due traders throughout the entire voyage. When these people had been brought to the place called Scadia, which is in Egypt, I looked that up. You can look it up yourself. So now they were expelled. They went under expulsion, right? They were being led away, and now they've been led away on ships, right? And now the place that they're being led to is a place called Skydia, which is in Egypt. So they were led away as slaves into Egypt. This came to pass, and it matched Deuteronomy 28:68, and it was marking a lot of matches. Look, it's going to go on. And the voyage was finished, just as the king had declared. But Ptolemy, king of Egypt and a Greek, ordered the captives to be encamped on the outskirts of the city in the race course.
Well, now I'm kind of confused because Ssoreal is saying that 70 AD is what Deuteronomy 28 is about. Now he's saying that the 300 to 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament, the prophecies are being checked off. I think that's what he's saying. I mean, I'm not really paying attention because this dude is all over the place, but I need to since I'm doing a video. But you can listen to it yourself. But it sounds like at the beginning of the video, he said that Deuteronomy 28 was taking place in 70 AD. Now he's saying that it's taking place in a different event. And that brother, he's confused, and he's confusing everybody that listens to him. But instead of people, saying, hey, brother, explain yourself. How did you do this? Or why did you say this? And now you're saying this. They don't want to. They don't want that confrontation with with Ssoreal. So they'll just go along with it because they feel like, okay, if I go against it, then I'm gonna look stupid. But nah, he's coming with a stupid doctrine. Put it out there and let them know.
It's talking about a stadium, right? Now we're going to go ahead and skip the verse 17 at the yellow down there. It says, at the end of 40 days, the clerks reported to the king that they were no longer able to complete the task of drawing up a list of all the Jews because of their countless number. Now, what about the historians? What about Josephus? He basically confirms the Greek captivity involved Jews being brought to Egypt to be slaves. So that means Deuteronomy 28:68 has been fulfilled in this context. So you got Jews, you got Jerusalem and Samaria and the places near Mount Gerizim. He led them all into Egypt and settled them there. That comes from chapter 1, how Ptolemy, the son of Lagus, took Jerusalem and Judea by deceit and treachery and carried away many of the Jews thence and planted them in Egypt. Antiquities of the Jews, book 12. Also, you have took Jews captive and made them slaves and brought them into our cities and into this country and then sold them, and also those that were in my kingdom before them, as if and if they were and if there be any that have been lately brought thither, be made free by those that possess them, and let them accept of 120 drachma for every slave, and that by removing them into Egypt, the soldiers have made great profit by them. So that once again, that comes from book 12, and that's Josephus. And once again, I just wanted to show you a bigger image of this eagle that they would have seen as they were being taken away out of their homeland. Now, these are all the places that they eventually will be scattered by the end of this whole presentation. So you can see that those are all the areas throughout the Mediterranean Sea. So those are all the borders, right?
What's strange now, it seems like Ssoreal is picking and choosing because he said in his video, he's showing you where the Israelites were taken into captivity or scattered. And, it was all in, basically the same region. I guess what you would call Europe or Eurasia. Or, I mean, it wasn't even nowhere in Africa. No, I mean, not even in an African tectonic plate. Not even in Asia. There were like remote areas circling a sea, and I'm gonna go back to it so you can see it. But he wants to use Deuteronomy 28 as a qualifier, but you see what he did? He went to verse 63, and he didn't even go down to verse 64. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, not just where you got arrows pointed at, all people from one end of the earth unto the other. That little section is very small, and that's not from one end of the earth to the other. Okay? And thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor their fathers have known, even wood and stone. We knew about the Roman gods, okay? Apollos and all of them. That's why Tacitus said that we believed everything they did was an abomination. So Ssoreal just basically trying to mold a doctrine of his own. And it's not going to work, Ssoreal. It's not going to work because you're going to have people that's always going to pick apart your doctrine because it's fake. It's false. You're not a Christian. You're not a Christian. You're a false Christian. You're false. You're false. And it's weak. You need to cut it out. Misleading these people. Telling them they can basically do whatever they want. Because if they slip, they're under grace. That doesn't mean, slipping doesn't mean do whatever you want, brother. Let's put that in perspective. But your arrows are just way off. It's a misconception.
Finally, now that we're getting to the bare end of this presentation, this is a final part. This is the Bar Kokhba Wars, right? So, I decided I don't think I'm gonna touch on 70 AD that much in here because I think 70 AD is a little obvious. So let's go ahead to the Bar Kokhba Wars of 135 AD, and it also matches Deuteronomy 28:68. Now I know what you're thinking, Matt. Wait a minute, didn't we just get done reading Maccabees how that happened? Yes. So what you're saying? They went to Egypt again? Yes. Well, wasn't the temple destroyed in 70 AD? Yes. So what's up with 135 AD? Well, let me explain. Basically, you had Hadrian. He kind of felt a little bad for, um, he kind of felt bad for the Jews, and so he decided to kind of like let them go back into their land for a little while. But of course, when they got back in their land, what do you think the Jews did? They want to set up the kingdom and they want to drive their enemies out. They want to, uh, and of course, once again, the emperor didn't send them back in their land so they could just, get the Romans off their backs. No, like you still got to pay taxes. So what do you think happened in the end? Um, anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and skip this one. I'm gonna go ahead and go to the next one. You guys can go ahead and pause this and read it if you like. One thing I will point out is that it says this. And those who were still not sold there were herded into ships and were taken to Egypt. Many died in transit, whether by starvation or by shipwreck, while many also were killed by cruel masters. That comes from Munter. Munter, he's once again a historian.
All right, so basically, Ssoreal wants to quote Munter, and I love it when they do this because Munter, as you see, he was evangelist, Protestant theologian, and he man, this guy came around in 1761. Okay, this was basically almost 1700 years after the siege of Jerusalem. But where did Munter get his information from? That's what Ssoreal fails to understand. And basically, let's find out where he got his clip from. Well, his quote from that he quoted in the book of Primordi Ecclesiasticus. The beginning of the church. That was supposed to have been the name of it in English, interpreted from I think Latin or Greek. Primordi Ecclesiastics. So that's the first church. All right, so let's see what he got his quote from. All right, basically, what Ssoreal just did was quoted Munter, a Roman historian. But the funny part about it is this Roman historian was born around 1700 or 1800, about 1700. Okay, so 70 AD was long gone before he came along. So now the onus is on Ssoreal since he used it as a citation to find out where Munter got this quotation from. Okay, where he got this little tidbit of knowledge. And because Betar and Israel was actually destroyed in the 2nd century AD. And we already know that Egypt was a Roman colony, and also there were Israelites already in Egypt, and they had little communities. So this line of thinking doesn't make sense. But the other thing that's kind of interesting is this Primordial Ecclesiasticus Africani, which means actually the first church of Africa. I believe it's in Greek or Latin. You'll find these quotes all over the place, but I'm not so sure anybody actually read the book themselves. I know Ssoreal hasn't. Well, I don't know, but I'm pretty certain Ssoreal hasn't read it because he doesn't read Latin. Well, I'm gonna just assume that he doesn't read Latin, so I'm assuming that he hasn't read that book. And all he did was follow other guys on his little message board and just basically quoting what other people quote without actually reading it for itself. And that right there is laziness. And I've been looking for it all day, trying to find where this quote came from. About 3 months ago, I found I was able to narrow it down to Saint Jerome, but now I'm trying to follow those footsteps, and I don't have it in the history, and I don't think I bookmarked it. So Saint Jerome, he's actually one of the scholars, and he's a historian that put together the Latin Vulgate. Okay, so Ssoreal, this Roman historian, you got to first of all prove where this quote came from and who did the quote. I'm throwing it out there that it's Saint Jerome around 300 A.D., right around the time of the Council of Nicaea. So now the onus is on you to prove where this quote came from, because you can't use a quote that you haven't researched for yourself. So now this quote is erased. It should be erased from your whole repertoire until you decide to go on a hunt and find out where this quote came from.
Yep, you guessed it. The Romans plowed Jerusalem with a yoke of oxen. Jews were sold into slavery, and many were transported to Egypt. Judean settlements were not built. Um, Jerusalem was turned into a pagan city called Aelia Capitoline. I think I butchered that again, but that's okay. And the Jews were forbidden to live there. They were permitted to enter only on the ninth day of Av to mourn their losses in the revolt. Hadrian changed the country's name from Judea to Syria Palestina. In the years following the revolt, Hadrian discriminated against all Judeo-Christian sects, but the worst persecution was directed against religious Jews. He made anti-religious decrees forbidding Torah study, Sabbath observance, circumcision, Jewish courts, meeting in synagogues, and other ritual practices. Many Jews assimilated, and many sages and prominent men were martyred, including Rabbi Akiva and the rest of Asara and Haruge, Malkut, 10 martyrs. The age of persecution lasted throughout the remainder of Hadrian's reign till 138 CE. That came from the Jewish Virtual Library.org. Source Judaism/Revolt 1. You can see the sources at the bottom of the link page site. That's where that came from. So if you want to know all those citations, go to that site and you can read all the citations that they're drawing from to give you the history I'm reading to you now. So
basically, Ssoreal said all of that to really prove nothing. He just got a lot of information, and I haven't seen how he relates the Jews that he's reading about to modern day Jews or modern day what he considers black Hebrew Israelites. He has done nothing to prove otherwise. And since he wants to use a quote saying that from a book he's never read before, Munter in particular, I guess I'm gonna go ahead and pull up a quote from a book I can't seem to find either, but it's supposed to be a book by Josephus himself, The Capture of Jerusalem. And let's just see, let's just see what it says about blacks as far as captured Jerusalem by Josephus. So Ssoreal basically want to bring up those pictures early in the video, and basically without him saying it, he's trying to say that the Jews are everything but black. So here's a book called Nature Knows No Color Line. This is on page 123 that I'm about to read. And I know they know about Tacitus because they talk about Tacitus. So and he's a Roman historian that basically hates Jews. But this is what Tacitus has to say. Tacitus of about 90 AD says, many assert that the Jews are an Ethiopian race. For Romans to have taken them for Ethiopians is a clear indication of their color, since the Ethiopians were definitely black to the Romans. Ancient Jewish legends themselves recognize a Negro strand among the Jews. And I'm going to just continue reading down. Genesis Rabbah 18 reads, when the Jews returned from Babylon, their wives had become brown almost during the years of captivity, and a large number of men divorced their wives. The divorced women probably married black men, which would to some extent account for the existence of black Jews. Let's read that again. When the Jews returned from Babylon, their wives had become brown almost during the years of captivity, and a large number of men divorced their wives. The divorced women probably married black men, which would to some extent account for the existence of black Jews. Solomon loved a black Shulamite, and his song was written to her. She was black but comely and burnt by the sun. Well, I'm gonna do a video on Solomon, Songs of Solomon, to show that that's not a woman, that's Solomon. But hold on, wait. Waits says, an interesting graduation of all shades down to the black is exhibited by the Jews, especially dark were the Jews of Spain and Portugal. The Portuguese Jews were very dark, says Pritchard. The Duchess Abrantes, wife of Napoleon ambassador to Portugal, said that the Jew, the Negro, and the Portuguese could be seen in a single person. So dark were the Jews, especially of Portugal and southern Spain, that many whites thought all Jews were black or dark. So, Ssoreal, if you're gonna come up with this, all of this doctrine or all of these historical facts, come with some facts to give some skin complexions and tones, because all you're doing is reading information, but it's not getting at the complexion of the so-called Jews. But let's carry on. All right, this is from page 130 of Nature Knows No Color Lines. And this is, I guess, John Bigelow, who visited Jamaica in 1850, saw the descendants of these Jews and says they were Negroid. Oh, wow. And these are people that are, okay, well, let's read them. The Eastern Jews who settled in Austria. Oh, not Austria where white folks are. Poland. Oh, not Poland where white folks are. Russia. Oh, not where white folks are. Were Negroid too. And Count Adam Górowski of Poland, who visited the United States in 1857, said the Jews of his country strongly resembled American mulattoes. Number of Jews, he said, have the greatest resemblance to the American mulattoes. Sallow complexion, thick lips, crisp black hair. Of all the Jewish population scattered over the globe, where they meant of the globe, they meant globe, 1/4 dwells in Poland. Wow. Wow, in Poland. To me, that means something. I am, therefore, well acquainted with their features. On my arrival in this country, America, I took every light-colored mulatto for a Jew. Considerable Negro strand was found, too, among the Polish Jews in London, where white folks are. These are where white folks are. But he's given a description of these Jews. For years, two New York white delis, the News and the Mirror, have been advertising kinky hair, straightening permanently, and one treatment. The service is for whites only. The customers are probably Jews. A Negro hairdresser in Harlem once had many of them among her customers. Karl Marx, who bore a strong resemblance to Frederick Douglass, undoubtedly came of this Negroid stock. His nose was broad, his hair frizzly, and his color so dark he was called the Moor. Negro strain was even more evident in Ferdinand Lassalle, aristocratic founder of socialism. Marx, his rival, called him a Jewish nigger, a greasy Jew from Breslau, who was always concealing his woolly hair with all kinds of hair oil and makeup. So right here is even saying the white folks with fuzzy hair can be of Negro stock, especially, I think one is Carmen Diaz and maybe Angelina Jolie. But anyways, but the description is there from multiple people that know that around this time they knew who the Jews were. And this is years later. And they consider the blacks Jews. And in all of these areas where white folks are, the Negroes in those areas were Jews. So, I mean, you could probably come up with like a little, oh, well, they were probably slaves to the Jews, or, they were converts. Well, they didn't say anything about the white Jews, which would be their slave masters. No, they were talking about the actual Jews. So, Ssoreal, I look forward to your response. All right, looking at Tacitus on the Jews, page 2. You can see it highlighted. Many assure us that the Jews are descended from those Ethiopians who were driven by fear and hatred to immigrate from their home country when Cephas was king. All right, so Tacitus was assured that the Jews descended from the Ethiopians. And I know some of you are going to say, yeah, Solomon had wives. They could have been Ethiopian, so that's why those Jews are black. And then you're probably going to, use pretty much Solomon, because you shouldn't think that since he was ready, which, Brother Jay already went over that ready means, something like a brown. But just to play your game, Solomon could have been another race. But pretty much when you look through the history in Austria, in Russia, in Germany, those Jews were black. And they were described as black. Now you got in Jerusalem, these the Jews look as if they're Ethiopians in the homeland. If this is around 70 A.D., which you said they were in the land, and Tacitus is saying right here that they were in the land and immigrated from their home country when Cephas was king. So there's your preterist doctrine. I mean, what you consider a Christian doctrine, but it's actually a preterist doctrine. Does your preterist doctrine line up with saying that Solomon could have been white, or that the Jews could have been white, when around that time he's a Roman? He doesn't care where they're from. He just assured that they descend from Ethiopians. So those are the ones that he was looking for. So I know that you're probably gonna argue that those brown slaves, which they call them Jews here, but you're gonna say those that were brown were probably a slave of the Jews. So as their property, they became Jews. But if you just keep going back further, you will notice that the Jews had always been a dark race. So whatever point you're trying to make, You keep backing yourself in a corner, Ssoreal. And I mean, dude, you come up with some good points, but for the most part, your points are shot down by just so much falsehood and so much relying on others for information. But Brother Ssoreal, come out of that heresy, and in the Shield Squad, come out of that heresy. The S.O.G squad, come out of that heresy. And you don't even know it. But this is
Not only that, but I have additional notes. I, didn't want to put this as part of my presentation, but I decided to anyway, right? So these are actual additional notes. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Can you give me a second? I think I was supposed to hold on. Oh, I think there's something that's missing, y'all. I'm sorry. Just give me a second here. Please forgive me. There's something that I did, and for some unknown reason, I don't see it. Oh well. Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and continue anyway. And once again, I hope this is helping out. I'm trying to be as simple as possible. Just give me a second. Let's put this back up. Here we go. And like I said, don't worry, at the end, I'll definitely give you my thoughts on all of this. Okay, here we go. Share with everyone. All right. So we're at the bitter end. These are my additional notes of this presentation. And here they are. These are additional notes from Josephus' Wars of the Jews. It says the Romans find the Jews are worth little to nothing as slaves, and the young males were deported to Egypt to work as slaves in the Egyptian mines. Then you have Hegesippus, or Hegesippus. Hegesippus, in his 5 books on the Jewish war and the ruin of the city of Jerusalem, he writes concerning the Jews that after Jerusalem was taken by Titus, a great and many were for sale, but there were few buyers. For the Romans scornfully rejected the Jews as slaves, neither were there surviving who redeemed their own, right? And that is, Meniochus out of Boniferus. Now, Hegesippus, he died in 180, and he was a Jewish convert to Christianity. He wrote an ecclesiastical history which survives only in fragments. And De Bello Jutudicat, which I probably tortured his name again, he was the one that basically, I believe, cites Hegesippus here. Now, here's another part of Josephus, the Jewish Wars. Once again, this is book number 6, and this is chapter 9. It says this: because the soldiers were now growing weary of bloodshed and survivors appeared constantly, Caesar's orders to kill only those who offered armed resistance and to take alive all the rest. The troops, in addition to those covered by their orders, slaughtered the aged and the infirm. Now time out. What does that sound like? That sounds like people who do not care for the elderly. Isn't that what Deuteronomy 28 said? People to their prime who might be useful, they herded into the temple area and shut in the court of the women. Caesar appointed one of his freedmen as their guard, his friend Fronto, to decide the fate appropriate for each. All those who had taken part in sedition and the brigands, they informed against each other, right? He executed. So in other words, all the traitors got executed, I guess. He picked out the tallest and handsomest of the lot and reserved them for the triumph. Of the rest, those who were over 17, he put in chains and sent into hard labor in Egypt, while great numbers were present by Titus. to the provinces to perish in their theaters by sword and by wild beasts, those under 17 years old. Finally, here's Cassius Dio. He's basically one of my favorite because he produced like 80 volumes of books, which I don't know how he did. He says this. This is in he was born 125, he was born 150, died 235. A Roman historian tells us, quote, few Jews remained alive. 50 of their strongest fortified cities and 985 of their best towns and villages were demolished. 580,000 died on the battlefield, beside countless others who perished of hunger and pestilence. Wow, pestilence. Now time out. That once again sounds like something from Deuteronomy 28. The entire land of Judea was almost transformed into a barren wasteland. Now, Cassius Dio is no lightweight. He's a heavyweight. He basically published a history of Rome in 80 volumes. Of the 80 books written over 22 years, many survive into the modern age intact or as fragments, providing modern scholars with a detailed perspective on Roman history. Cassius Dio. Finally, you have Munter, right? He's a Roman historian. I read him before. I'll read another part of him. This comes from Africane, right? Page 85. And also page 113. Now that Bethar, right? I know it says Bethar, had been captured, right? And that is, Bethar was the Judean highlands, right? So they went all the way up there. Everything came under human control, while Palestine, Judah, was reduced to a desolate mound. Captives were sold into slavery, and numbers were too great to count. First, they were brought into the grand annual market at the Terebinth Eloah tree in Hebron, or in the words of Hieronymus, to the tent Ohel of Abraham near Hebron. Each slave sold for the price of a horse. Those captives were not sold. They were brought to the market. They were brought to the marketplace in Gaza, which is Gaza, which, because of the great multitudes of slaves, were sold there. It was called Hadrian's Marketplace, and those who were still not sold there were herded into ships and were taken to Egypt. Many died in the transit, whether by starvation or by shipwreck. I know I'm reading this again, but I don't care. While many were killed by cruel masters.
Munter, Primordia Ecclesiastic Africane, which means the first church of Africa. And basically, when he quotes Munter, he's quoting it as if he read the book. The book, I want to say, is in Latin or Greek. And basically, if you copy and paste what Ssoreal has listed, it'll take you to actual websites, to those that used and copied and paste this same text right here. That's a copy and paste probably over 1,000 times just to prove a point. And not once has anybody shown the actual book with this information in it. Ssoreal, have you read this yourself? And do you have any idea who those slaves were as far as ethnic wise? And you think you do, because those pictures, like I said, look like my family. But you guys are something else. You say you do history, but you do shoddy history. You say you use the Bible correctly, but your doctrine is flawed. So, I mean, you guys are getting boring.
Of course, there's a guy named Emil Schurier, and he's from around 1896, I guess, and he basically wrote a book called A History of the Jewish People in the Time of Jesus Christ, and this is what he says: the toll of Bar Kokhba uprising was devastating both on the population on the places of habitation. The numbers of dead were awesome, while multitudes of Jews were taken captive to fill the slave markets near and far. The slave market of the tenement of Hebron um, was particularly famous as a center where Jewish slaves sent into captivity by Hadrian were sold. So many Jewish slaves were available that, according to one report, a Jew was sold for as little as price of a portion of a horse feed. History of Yisrael in ancient days, right? Innumerable was the multitude of those who were sold away as slaves, and at the annual market at Terebinth of Hebron they were brought offered for sale in such numbers that a Jewish slave was of no more value than a horse. What could be more what could be more disposed of there was brought to Gaza and there sold or sent to Egypt. And they're sold or sent to Egypt on the way, which many died of hunger or of shipwreck. So let's look at this word bondage, because they often think, well, Egypt means bondage. Egypt, no, no, it does not at all. Let's go ahead and look at Exodus chapter 13, verse 3. It says this: And Moses said unto the people, Remember this day in which ye came out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For my strength of the hand, for by strength of hand, the Lord brought you out from this place, and there shall be no leavened bread be eaten. Now, the word translated bondage literally means slavery, all right? Laborer or worker, not confined, not besieged, not bind up, or to enclose, as some black Hebrew Israelite proponents like to try to point out. Let's look at some better translations in the verse. This is CJB. It says, quote, the abode of slavery. The NASB says, quote, from the house of slavery. You have the scriptures, the TS2 2009, which I, particularly never use. But black Hebrew Israelites like to use it a lot. So I decided to use their own faulty, interesting translations. It says, quote, out of the house of slavery. So that means, hold on, I'm sorry. Now, before I go ahead and wrap up this thing about bondage, I wanted to show this picture here real quick. Notice that the main sources of African slaves were these places, right? This is where they're being taken from. And notice they're not being taken from Israel. They're not being taken from Egypt or any of those kind of places. But I know what you're thinking. Matt, we traveled all throughout Africa. Therefore, the Israelites were all throughout Africa. All right. Well, it does say that the Israelites are supposed to go to the furthest parts of the world. So why in the world are the majority of them just going to the west? Right? Aren't they supposed to go everywhere? But look where they're hitting. The main areas of slave importation in the New World was, southern North America, Cuba, the Caribbean islands. You have the north part of South America, which is Venezuela and Ghana. You had Ecuador. You have Buenos Aires, Bahia, Recife. Those.
I don't know what Ssoreal's talking about because early in this video, he pulled out this map and said this where all the Jews were. I mean, I said it earlier. What about being scattered all over? So now he's trying to dissect somebody else's interpretation of the Americas, but he got arrows pointing basically in Eurasia. I mean, he doesn't have arrows pointing anywhere else. And then also, just in the areas where he got the arrows pointed, I mean, we did find out that there were black Jews in those areas, and as a description. So, Ssoreal, you got to get your weight up, man, because right now you too light. And I think you're afraid to get your weight up because then you're gonna have to leave that, what is it, black apologetics Christian proponent doctrine.
Those are the places that they're being sent. What happened to being scattered to the four corners of the earth? But yet, your 12 tribes chart makes sure that they name every western part of hemisphere that they can think of. That's a contradiction. So, I want to go ahead and take a look at this same verse, okay? because I'm still kind of looking at this whole thing about bondage. So here it is in Hebrew. Here it is in the transliteration of the Hebrew. So here we see the words for slavery, translated bondage in the KJV, is avadim. Avadim is the masculine plural form for ebed. Now you will look up ebed. What do you find? Slave, servant, man, servant. That's what you find. You don't find Egypt. You find servant, slave, right? That's what you find. Bondage, slave, not Egypt. Also, there's another word translated bondage in the KJV, and it is avoda, right? Avoda. So you have Exodus 1:14, and it uses the word a bit. It says, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field, and all their service wherein they made them serve was in rigor. So that word hard bondage, take a look at it. Look at this definition. You have labor, service, labor, work, labor of servant or slave, labor, service of captives or subjects. Okay, that's what the the word was. So both words mean slavery, labor and servant or bondage, as in a slave, right? So, oh man, let me go ahead and just go ahead and skip the rest of this because I'm really trying to not be long winded tonight. Let's go ahead and look at Deuteronomy 28:68, right? Now it says that God through Moses only made his statement concerning the literal Egypt geographical location, not about the Americas or any other place. Let's look at this verse in another version. Once again, I'm going to use the, what Black Hebrew Israelites like to use on the Hebrew rooters. The scripture is TS 2009. Quote, by way of, which I said to you, you are never to see it again, right? By way of, okay? Now, where is the by way of? Why is that important? Because it was not by way of Africa to the transatlantic slave trade. No, it was by way of Jerusalem, Israel, through the Red Sea, and the same way that they left Egypt, right? That's what it means. So this verse is speaking in reference to a statement Moses made about the literal geographic place. Where is, quote, it that Moses is talking about? Let's see what that place is. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 16. It says this, moreover, he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor shall he cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never again return that way. So the it is Egypt. Egypt is a place being spoken of, not some spiritual or metaphoric place. The words in Deuteronomy 28:68 are darn near identical to what Moses said here in chapter 17, verse 16. Why are Hebrew Israelites ignoring the rest of the verse? Plus, the whole context of Deuteronomy 28 is speaking of these things taking place in Israel. Go read the whole chapter and see it for yourself. Not talking about this is going to take place in Africa and all of a sudden you're going to go to these places in America and all around the. No, it's not talking about that.
Ssoreal, we already went over in this video. I know you haven't seen it yet, but the Jews were already in Egypt. So if they were already in Egypt, what's so hard to believe that they were sold from Egypt like you professed to different countries, which Africa is some of those countries, but we know that they were in Germany, Russia, and all those different places. And if you look at the history, they brought slaves to America from all those countries. And those slaves are traded even through this Sahara region. So, I mean, your point is no point at all.
That's why I went back and I showed all those phrases where it said in your land, in land that you are going to possess. This is consistent. So, the verdict. Under the Greeks, did they lead to Egypt from Israel? Yes. Did they go to Egypt literally? Yes. Were they on ships? Yes. Were they both sold and some not sold? Yes. Were they sold unsold as slaves? Yes. What about under the Romans in 70 CE when they burned the temple, right? Did they go from Israel? Yes. Did they go into Egypt? Yes. Was it on ships? Yes. Were they both sold and unsold? Yes. As slaves? Yes. What about under the Romans in 135 CE when they wanted to or AD when they wanted to do the Bar Kokhba Wars? Well, look at it. Was it from Israel? Yep. Did they go to Egypt? Yep. Were they on ships? Mm-hmm. Were they both sold and unsold? You bet. As slaves? Of course. Now the transatlantic slave trade. Was it from Israel? Oh no, it was from West Africa. Oh, okay, okay. Did they go to Egypt? Well, no, they were too busy exploring the profits of the new world, right? They made a lot of good profit there. Were they on ships? Yep. Were they both sold and unsold? No, because it was about that money, so they definitely got sold. Were they as slaves? Yep. There it is. That's what my entire presentation looks like in one slide. You have to ask yourself, who gave you this myth that history does not reveal and does not hold at all? The entire ancient world of antiquity proves that the transatlantic slave trade is in no way any match to the historians and prophecies of the Bible. Everybody wants the truth until it contradicts what they believe, then it becomes a problem. So that is the end of my presentation. I hope this short little hour of a trip throughout the ancient world has really been eye opening for you. Like I said, we've proven. Wait a minute, I think I hear somebody else in the room, and since I do, I want to show them a little slide that just might make you laugh. So this is a verdict, whoever you are. This is my entire like presentation of all my slides into one slide. Literally, if I could have just summed everything up in one slide, it would be this. All right. Let me find out who this is. Let me see.
So
Oh, wait.
me and
Hey, what's up, y'all?
yo,
Y'all just get here?
yeah, I just came in, but I was watching for a little bit.
Okay, cool. Um, well, yeah, like I said, y'all popped in right on time because I'm practically finished. Uh, but yes, this is, you know, a way that you could actually show Black Hebrew Israelites that this did happen multiple times. The reason why they ended up saying that this happened multiple times was because of the whole 70 AD. They couldn't get around it. So they were forced to say, well, this prophecy, or not prophecy, but these curses, they're perpetual and they happen multiple times. Well, dang, man. Well, it happened 3 times already.
Ssoreal, your scholarship is shoddy, and here's two ways to go ahead and debunk your video. First of all, we're gonna start with that checkbox, both sold and unsold. Yeah. All right, Deuteronomy 28 and 68, the last part says, and no man will buy you. So that means if any person is sold, then 70 AD under the Greeks and under the Romans in 135 is not a prophecy of Deuteronomy 28 and 68, because if any one of those were sold, according to your definition, it doesn't fit the prophecy. So, by your own admission, under the Greeks, under the Romans in 70 AD, and under the Romans in 135 AD, under your chart, that's not the prophecy for Deuteronomy 28 and 68. Okay? But back to from Israel to Egypt. Okay, under the Greeks, yeah, they were sold into Egypt, but we know under Romans in 70 AD, there were already Israelites over there in communities, small communities in Egypt, because at that point, Egypt was a Roman province. Okay, so all in that region, all around there, you had Jewish communities. So to be sold in a land where you already got family at, it's just damning to your evidence. And not only that, these people are supposed to come from a nation that nobody understands, nobody know who they are, and they come in with this strange God that nobody's ever heard, or this God, period, that nobody's heard of. But if the Roman province was already in Egypt, then you should check that off your list too, because Tacitus said that the Jews were just repulsive to him. So he knew the Jews and they knew him, or they knew the Romans. So by your own admission, Deuteronomy 28 does not fit your chart. So you gotta call her on the line and let's see what he says. See if he points out these flaws in your understanding. Pretty sure he's not, because he has an agenda as well. He's like the girlfriend with animosity after a bad breakup. But let's see what these guys got to say.
And the fourth time that y'all tried to count doesn't match the other 3 times. So why is it that people continue to say, well, why do the transatlantic slave trade Africans match these curses? And I keep on asking the question, how do you see that? How do you see them matching the curses? How do you miss all these other things? So hold on just a second. It seems that I have a comment from Mac, and Mac says, just a second, jeez. Yo, what are you teaching? Because I'm still waiting for this dialogue over here. Is this really the time to teach? Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna invite him in. That's what I'm gonna do, because practically I'm done with the presentation. So hold on, y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and
yeah, definitely do that. Yeah.
Yeah, let me get this dude in here real quick. You know, let me see.
No, why you bring him in? Can I say something right quick?
Yeah, man, go ahead, knock yourself out.
No problem. You know, you guys saw the slides and this chart. You know, it's plain to see. You know, Black Hebrew Israelite, I'm gonna use faithful to God's word, proponents. They would always make the statement, who else fit all these curses? You know, and who else been through this? Who else been enslaved on ships? Well, when you look at world history, man, slavery taking place via some transportation of ships has happened multiple times. We mention it all the time. You know, you look at the Indian Ocean slave trade, the Barbary slave trade that took place over the Mediterranean. You know, with the East Africans and the even the I always jack the name up, but it might
Transatlantic.
No, the one with the Arabs, the transatlantic, Sahara or whatever.
What is that? I forget.
But there's even history on that. You know, you have like actual Europeans that were sold to North Africans. So and you Black Hebrew Israelites, y'all can read that in that book, Babylon Timbuktu as well. It tells you as well about that. So it's happened multiple times. In terms of who fits all the curses, or as if, you know, the blacks in America fits all the curses. I'm gonna put it this way, because I am a so-called, you know, black man here in America. I have much to gain. Matter of fact, all of us on this panel have much to gain by making this proclamation that Black Hebrew Israelites are making. We have much to gain, you know, God's people, you know, came for us, you know, all this kind of stuff that these guys teach on the streets and stuff and in these schools. But we reject it because it's simply not the scriptures. You can't twist the scriptures to make them to fit this narrative that you guys are painting. He showed you the maps. You guys see the chart. When you guys go and look back at Deuteronomy 28, all right, verses, just starting with the curses, verses 16 through verse 55 are all pertaining to the land specifically. So you definitely don't fit that. And then when you get into, you know, like verse 25, 26, 27, 29, 30, 35, 36, you get into these other verses, you get into like verse 48, 49, you get into the infamous, you know, swift as an eagle flieth. It's the same thing as when Revelations 1 says, hair was white like wool. It was using a comparison to an eagle. And when you guys look at an eagle sits up high, he stares at his prey. And if you ever see him attack or go after something on the ground, he takes one dive. He don't flap his wings. No, he just glide through the air. He don't stop. He don't slow down. He just takes his feet, grab the prey while he's still in motion, and go right back up in the air. It's one motion. The Lord was showing Israel, if they transgress the covenant, how quickly he will remove them from the land. That's what he was telling them. How quickly they would be removed. You see that in Jeremiah 17. You see this in all these different scriptures. He says, as swift as an eagle flieth. All right. He didn't say it was an eagle. He didn't say their symbol was an eagle. He didn't say they will rep an eagle. He was using the eagle and its natural ability when it's stalking its prey to show Israel how quickly he will remove them out of the land that he gave them.
I heard Brother Jay come in and he went and talked for a while. But not one time did I hear him come up with a scripture or Ssoreal really come with any scriptures to kind of prove that the American blacks aren't Jews other than Deuteronomy 28 and 68. And they failed. Their understanding failed. Ssoreal is up there making statements about Deuteronomy 28 and 68 when on this chart he has sold and unsold. That right there disqualifies his whole chart. And Brother Jay comes in and he just want to tell you about an old story about an eagle, how it swoops down and takes its prey. But it's funny how the Roman army has a eagle for, as a national bird, and that represents their flag. So, Jay, I don't get it. I don't get why he's so gung-ho about, showing his ex-girlfriend or his ex-boyfriend that, hey, you right, you wrong, and I'm right. Because he's just showing how wrong and unlearned he is, and he's going under the S.O.G of God's shield, and that heresy over there is just doomed. I'm going to listen to the caller for a little bit to see if he has something edifying to add, because I thought Brother Jay was, but he didn't. So maybe the caller could, go back and forth for a couple minutes before I end this video.
So, yeah, go ahead, bro.
Yeah.
That was Ssoreal or not, but
yeah, no.
What's going on, bro?
No, not much. Okay, so this is interesting now. Since you guys are talking about the curses, and I didn't get most of it since I just got in here. My question to you is, when you said you were a so-called black man,
yeah,
why do you subscribe to that?
Well, that's just what we call.
No, okay, who called you that?
In terms of so-called black man?
Yeah.
To my knowledge, that's just a name that was put on us, either from captivity or what we call ourselves, from slavery as far as the ancestors, or, a name like, for example, like African-American that was given to us by apparently Reverend Jesse Jackson. So, I mean, it came from someone. Right. The color black, obviously people was calling each other black before American slavery, but
Yeah, I think you got in the Bible.
right?
There's a man called Niger. So I think it was probably a first century way that they identified folks. But of course, in the first century, I'm sure it didn't have any like the kind of racial intensities of the 1640s.
Yeah.
Well,
But yeah,
the difference is when you're talking about Simon, who is surnamed Niger.
yeah,
One, Niger had to deal with a place
right.
with people who were dark and black.
Okay.
So if we're talking about a person who is nicknamed that, and that is their actual color, and that is where they came from, and we know that this person is related to James as well as Jesus, why would we not assume that Jesus Christ would also be close to the color background that Simon would be, considering that he was of a dark ethnicity?
Well, I mean, once again, I know that we're going in circles, and we said this before. Brother Jay can attest to this. All of us believe that Jesus is black. That's not an issue. I think that just we need to really kind of stick with the subject I brought up tonight, and unless you guys do just want to talk about something else. But I mean, I thought that we'd at least try to kind of examine some painstaking things that
we just got in here, so we don't know what the subject was really about.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the subject is on the title. When you pulled up the video, it's Deuteronomy 28. Just this a second look, and mainly is verse 68. Originally, I wanted to just go through like the whole thing, but I kind of thought that no, let me do a part one, and just focus on like what everyone is making such a big jab out of. And then part two, I'll do that another time when I just go through everything. But yeah, tonight I just basically went through history and showed that Deuteronomy 28, 68 actually, happened 3 times in history. It's a pretty ironic number, isn't it? But yeah, it happened a total of 3 times. Say it again.
Why would you not think that it would not happen again?
Well, I mean, why would I think it would not happen again? Well, I think the only reason I would think that is perhaps 2 things. Something that Jesus said in Luke 21, and also just the new covenant itself. That's what it seems like to me. And also, I think another reason why it wouldn't happen again is because, when you look at, Jerusalem today, it would take an extreme amount of effort for people to just go over there and gut out Jews from their homeland and stuff them into Egypt. It's not like the first century good old days where they just did it. No, today is a little bit more complicated. And then on the top of all that, even if that did happen, the blacks over here in America, would just be like, well, they're not the real Jews anyway. So even though they're going into Egypt, it should have happened over here because we're the real ones. And but once again, every last one of them, those 3 times, that it happened in Jerusalem. It never happened from West Africa. It never happened from anywhere else. And that's totally consistent with the chapter of Deuteronomy 28.
Well, that's clearly false, because again, you understand that those very same curses that you're talking about happened to the Israelites. So apparently they're not real Israelites, because those curses, all of those curses, did not affect them during that entire chapter of Deuteronomy 28. You know that.
Hold on, can you like specify that a little bit more? Like, or what? Let me get this straight. Are you saying that because every last curse did not happen to the Jews from the Old Testament to the end of the New Testament, you're saying that is a reason to say that that they're not the real Jews of the first century?
No.
Okay.
I'm saying that I understand that if the Jews that are in the state, quote unquote, because it's not a country, it's
Yeah.
a state of Israel, if these are the real Jews, again,
Yeah.
if they are the real Jews, then why is it that according to scripture, the real Jews who are supposed to be there are, one, not supposed to have war no more. They're supposed to turn their swords and their spears into pruning hooks and plowshares.
Talk about Joel 3.
And that
Yeah.
occurs when Christ returns.
Oh,
Yeah,
wait. But the real Jews are supposed to be there. Not only that, not only
lives were there.
No, I'm saying, but this is what's crazy though. The real Jews are supposed to be there, even though we don't. Where are all the 12 tribes at? Because it's supposed to be all of them, not just one.
I mean,
it's not even one.
Point of time.
Well, I mean, overall, I'd like to really, I apologize. Perhaps that was my fault, but I really would like to get back to, just for a few more minutes, this presentation that I worked on here, and my question is that if Black Hebrew Israelites believe that the transatlantic slave trade is a definitive marker of proof of just them being descendants of Israelites or something like that, why is it that from the Old Testament times to the New Testament times, we have direct matches of Deuteronomy 28 and these historic events, and the transatlantic slave trade does not add up? I was wondering, why is that?
Wait, okay, you need to specify in Deuteronomy 28 what you're talking about, because again, those same curses in Deuteronomy 28, notice something here, it's a whole chapter. Okay, so you can't pull that nonsense. You need to specify, because again, the same curses did not apply to the Israelites in Judges when they did the exact same thing. And notice something, they were enslaved time and time again in Judges, yet they did not have a king then. So when you're talking about in Deuteronomy 28, which it talks about a king being enslaved, you can't use that. So specify to people. Stop doing that. That's being just disingenuous.
No, actually it can. If you look at the king of Assyria, he was taken away. The king he was taken to Assyria, the northern king of Israel. He was taken away in 622 by the Assyrians. So that's when that part was fulfilled. But when I do look at Second and Third Maccabees, when I do look at 70 AD, and when I do look at 135 AD with the Bar Kokhba uprising, and you look at all the historians and what they write, from Jews to their enemies, they all speak emphatically of Deuteronomy 28:68 actually happening, where they went into Egypt, sold into Egypt as slaves, and some wouldn't even buy them. There was a quote I actually did not put up here, where it said that they were so cheap that no one ever bought them. There was other times where they went into Egyptian mines, other times where they went into Egyptian race events or something like that. It was bad. I mean, it was pretty nasty. I even showed places in Second and Third Maccabees where the elderly were just marched to death, which which hit an exact verse in Deuteronomy 28. I forget what verse it is, but it's talking about how the elderly would not be treated very well at all. Daughters that you'll beget, but you won't enjoy them. I showed how in Second and Third Maccabees, how the women actually sung funeral songs at their forced weddings. It was bad. I wish you guys were here, but my question is, how is it that these things can all be seen as actual events of Deuteronomy 28, and they actually went into literal Egypt, and the Bible speaks of going into literal Egypt, and there's no talk of a spiritual Egypt, and yet the transatlantic slave trade just, had Africans that left Africa and went to America. They didn't even leave Israel. And the Deuteronomy 28 says that this stuff what happened with Jews leaving Israel into Egypt. But African Americans, they came from Africa into America. So that's like
no. When you say that when you say African Americans,
okay,
who are these African American? Who are these Africans that you're talking about? You need to be specific with that. Don't use the European terminology. Get specific. What tribe? Who are these people? Where did they come from? What were the names? Where did they come from? How did they get here? You're gonna have to specify that.
Okay. I'll do that right now. So give me a second. Can you see this?
Yeah,
now,
I can.
To the best of my knowledge, these are the places. You got Senegambia, Sierra Leone, places like Rwanda and Angola, of course, Mozambique. Those are the Africans. I'm pretty sure there's more, but those are the main hot spots. And so the question is, if the prophecy says that you Israelites are going to be gutted out of Israel and planted into Egypt, why is it that the transatlantic slave trade has Africans being gutted out of West Africa and being planted in South America, the Caribbean, and North America, which any of them were Egypt at all? But yet we find this happening 3 times earlier in history, and they actually went into Egypt. They did not go into any country. So
wait, where are you getting Jerusalem from?
I'm getting Jerusalem from the fact that when you look at Deuteronomy 28, it specifically talks about all these curses happening within their land, right? Also, verse 63 is a marker verse that shows that this Deuteronomy 28:68 is something that happens from Israel itself, which is going totally against something happening in Africa going to America. I mean, if I said to you, hey, I want you to come to Pennsylvania, and instead you leave New York to go to Los Angeles, you would automatically have to say, well, you didn't take the directions I told you. And so that's what I see when I look at, the history. Africans, they weren't in Israel, they were in Africa. And then when they went to where they went, they didn't go to Egypt, they went to America.
Okay.
And so
2 things.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna say 3. 1, and I just want a yes or no answer to get an understanding of where you're getting this from. But it says in 68, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Okay. Now, are you saying the verses prior to this, are you saying that all of these are referring to only in the land of Israel, and that's it, like pertaining to the land of Israel or in Egypt? Are you saying that that's it?
Well, to be more clear, I'm not saying that all these curses happened within Israel only. No, because that would go against other verses that say, hey, you guys are going to be taken away to a foreign nation. They're going to put iron around your necks, and you're going to go in this place and that place. Well, that shows that those curses, yes, they started in Israel, but when they carry you and take you away, that's also a part of the curses. So it's not like, oh, these people took us outside of Israel, therefore the curses don't happen no more. No, they're taking you away. That's part of the curses. It's the only difference is this is happening from the bedrock of Israel, from Jerusalem, Judea, from Israel. That's a difference. It's not happening from Angola.
Okay.
And then you know what I'm saying? It's talking about Herm Tur babes. And one other thing is Deuteronomy. You know, this is a time right before they're about to enter the promised land.
Okay.
So God is being real specific about, you know, this land, which is the reason why I have all these verses up here that talk about these curses being, you know, in the land, from the land. Like that's the emphasis, you
Okay.
know.
So
So
okay,
yeah,
I'm trying to give you sure because I want to get past it so I can understand where you're coming from because I wasn't here.
yeah.
So the other two, the next question. Okay, so pertaining to the fact that these curses do not specifically do not have to specifically take place in the land of Israel. Okay, because apparently there was always scattered. They kept getting scattered again and again whenever they were persecuted and whenever they sinned against God.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so with that being said, how do these curses? How does it not follow that these individuals that you're talking about? Because again, when I asked you who are these people that you're talking about, all you gave was just a giant landmass and a map to where these people got shipped from this spot to the next. But you're not telling people who these people actually are. You're just saying
Oh,
they're Africans. Who are the actual people, the tribes that they came from? What's the history with them? Where did they come from? That's my question. Who are these people? Because you're saying they come from Africa, but you're not
yes,
saying
these
where.
people are Africans. They come from many tribes. Some of the Limba tribe, some of the what's the other tribe? I believe that there is an Angola tribe. I believe. You have the Igbo tribe. You have you have hundreds of tribes that you know these Africans that came from, and you know they went into the West. And
Right.
so so that's what you have. But once again, the reason why I keep on asking this question is because you know I think you're ignoring something, and that is even though you're asking, you know, who were these people and where did they really come from, I keep on pointing the fact that where were they picked up at? Were they picked up in Jerusalem or were they picked up in the Ivory Coast?
Well, you just answered your own question because again, if these people can receive the curses and they are not necessarily in the land of Israel, of course, it will follow that again, just like the scripture says, these curses will follow you and overtake you till thou be destroyed. We know that Israel is not destroyed. So of course, these curses will still follow them wherever they are, as long
Do
as they do not come back to the Most High. So
but do you know what that
that
meant, right?
follows. Say what?
No, but do you know what that meant, right? That was talking about throughout their captivities, the Assyrian captivity, the Babylonian
No.
captivity, Greek captivity.
Every time Israel has sinned against God in Judges, again, in
Yeah.
Judges, they will go into captivity. They will be serving some other nation for a certain amount of years. After a judge will get them out, God will deliver the people that was enslaving them out of their hands. What happened? They went back to their sins again. Back in captivity you go. Back in captivity you go. Did God send like a botch from Egypt upon them? No. You would see that in other chapters later, in other books later. But you see that God would deliver a punishment upon them every time they kept sinning against Him. So it would only follow that if this is still going on, even during the time of Christ, this is still going on. The question is that if these people, okay, who were the Yoruba, the tribe of Ghana, the tribe of Ga, which is another which is the tribe of Gad, the Ewes, the Limbas, the Igbos, these tribes came from somewhere because we know that they're different from the other tribes, which are Hamites that are around them. And
No, they're actually not different. That's the part where your pseudo history is coming in, and not only that, but your big issue is that let's just say, because I like to do this sometimes. Let's just say I go ahead and give you the whole thing about how you take that one verse about, you know, these things will follow you till you're fully destroyed. Two problems. Problem number one, you know, of course they're not destroyed, and you said yes, that's because they're still around and still things like that. But then the second issue is that because of that, you can no longer marry that to Deuteronomy 28:68, which clearly says that they are going to go again into Egypt in ships. So if you're going to say that, what are they going to do? Are they going to be followed around till they're destroyed, or are they going to go into Egypt again in ships? If you say that they're going to be followed till they're destroyed, then you can no longer say that Deuteronomy 28 is what you use to show that that the Africans were really Israelites and they went into spiritual Egypt in America. You can't say that anymore because you're on this whole tirade of, these curses are going to follow you till you're destroyed. And not only that, but I forget, there's something else that you said. It will come back to me. But yeah, that's just a real issue, and it's I don't know. I think also the fact of the matter is that God is also operating in a new covenant. And a lot of times when that happens, that means that whatever kind of things go on in the old covenant, he's not operating under that anymore. This is the reason why we're going to be judged by Christ, not by Moses or anything like that. If anyone is judged by Moses, that's because they've actually stayed under the old covenant, which means the law is going to judge them, which is the worst thing ever. So these things here in Deuteronomy 28, they're not prophecies, they're conditions. This is God just walking up to Jerusalem and saying, hey, if you do this, this is what I will do for you. If you don't do this, this is what I will have happen to you. It's no different than what he did with David. David was in deep trouble one day, and he was fleeing from Saul. And so he took his prayer shawl somewhere in a cave or wherever he was, and he started to pray to God because he was hesitant about going into a refugee country of a good king that he thought was good. He asked God, if I go in there, will that king treat me well? And God said, yep.